Committee will reconvene. It's a long-standing practice that we swear in all of our witnesses, so will you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, answer in the affirmative. Let the record reflect that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. Let me introduce our panel. First of all, we have Charles Warfield, has been president and CEO of the Inner City Broadcasting Corporation since 2000 and is a 32-year veteran of broadcasting industry. His company owns 17 radio stations which target African Americans and urban audiences in New York City, San Francisco, Jackson, Mississippi, and Columbia, South Carolina. It is the second largest African American owned radio station company in the United States. Welcome. We also have Frank Flores. Started his career in the broadcasting industry in 1981. Since then, he has worked his way up from sales associate as a local station to this current position, Chief Revenue Officer and New York Market Manager for Spanish Broadcasting Systems. Welcome. Mr. Alfred Liggins is the President and CEO of Radio One and President and Chairman of TV One and LLC. Radio One is the largest multimedia company that targets African Americans and urban listeners with 52 radio stations located in 16 urban markets. Mr. Liggins is responsible for the overall management and operations of Radio One assets. Welcome.
Thank you.
Jessica Pantanini serves as the Chief Operating Officer for Bromley Communications and firm, as well as the Vice Chair for the Association of Hispanic Advertising Agencies. Ms. Pantanini is recognized as a national expert within the evolving Hispanic marketing industry. And of course, let me welcome all of you, and that what we would do, we would start with you, Mr. Warfield, and we would just come right down the line, okay?
Thank you. Chairman Towns, Ranking Member Issa, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me today to testify. As indicated, I'm Charles Warfield, and I am President and Chief Operating Officer of ICBC Broadcast Holdings, Inc. Our 37-year-old African-American-owned company operates 17 commercial broadcast radio stations that primarily target African-American audiences in New York City, San Francisco, Jackson, Mississippi, and Columbia, South Carolina. We have firsthand experience with the conversion of Arbitron rating surveys from paper diaries to the new personal people meter. Our stations have experienced a disproportionate reduction in the number of listeners reported by Arbitron's PPMs compared with stations that serve general audiences. The principal measurement that our industry uses is the average quarter-hour ratings, which translates directly into the number of dollars that an advertiser will pay for running a commercial. The average quarter hour can be measured for various demographics. Advertisers on our stations are most interested in listeners between the ages of 25 and 54, or in some cases 18 to 34. In New York City, the adults 25 to 54 average quarter hour for our station, WBLS, had been a steady 0.8 or 0.9 for the last 7 quarters in which Arbitron had used paper diaries for collecting data, which incorporates the period of fall 2006 through the spring of 2008. Immediately following the conversion to PPM, the average quarter hour from WBLS abruptly dropped to 0.4 for September of 2008, a 50% reduction. The average quarter-hour rating has fluctuated in the range of 0.3 to 0.6 for the 14 monthly rating periods beginning with that first report in September. Our formats did not change. Our audiences did not change. The only change was the PPM methodology. Arbitron also switched from paper diaries to PPM in the San Francisco market in September of 2008. And our station, KBLX-FM, took a similar hit in that market. In the spring ratings book, KBLX's adults 25 to 54 average quarter hour was a 0.5. The first PPM report gave the station an average quarter hour of 0.3, a drop of 40%. Since then, each monthly PPM survey has shown a decrease anywhere from 60 to 20% from the previous diary results. The same pattern shows up for stations serving African American and Hispanic audiences in other markets when PPM ratings are introduced. WDAS-FM in Philadelphia's top-rated station, according to the paper diaries, suffered a 44.4% decline in its average quarter-hour ratings for listeners 12 years old and older. Even more damaging was a 57.1% decline in its primary target demographics of adults 25 to 54. Also in Philadelphia, WRNB-FM and WUSL-FM incurred losses of 60 and 57.1% respectively in their 12-plus audience. KGLH-FM, the Los Angeles station owned and operated by Stevie Wonder and managed by Ms. Karen Slade, who's in attendance here today, suffered an 84% audience decline and dropped from number 20 in that market to number 40 with effectively no ratings. In Chicago, WGCI-FM, second ranked under paper surveys, lost 67% with PPM and dropped to number 12. In all of these markets, the only factor that can account for the precipitous deterioration is Arbitron's unaccredited ratings methodology. Plummeting ratings have shown up again and again for stations targeting African American and Hispanic audiences in other markets where Arbitron has introduced PPM. Ratings for stations using formats appealing to general audiences have been nowhere near as significantly affected. We do not believe the rating shifts are the result of the electronic measurement technology itself, but rather they stem from the methodology that Arbitron employs. The company has relied on telephone solicitation to recruit PPM survey panelists instead of address-based contacts. This change alone leaves out households with unlisted numbers and those that rely exclusively on cell phones. Young urban blacks and Hispanics are more likely to rely exclusively on cell phones than the average U.S. household. Arbitron has tried to make up for this for separate cell phone-only samples, but the numbers have been too small. Additionally, Arbitron is demanding that its PPM panelists make longer-term commitments to carry around a pager-sized device from the time they roll out of the bed until they return at night. Congressional hearings back in '64 made it obvious that ratings play a key role in the economics of commercial radios. The nonprofit MRC was formed to analyze ratings methodology and practices. So far, Arbitron has qualified as PPM service for MRC accreditation in only 2 markets, Houston and Riverside, out of the 30-plus that it has rolled it out in. It demonstrated that a PPM survey can be accredited. The Houston project was a joint venture, and it did demonstrate that the PPM survey can be accredited, but the recruiting process necessary is expensive, more than Arbitron wants to spend. Arbitron has been unwilling to invest the resources necessary to achieve MRC accreditation in any other markets. The reductions in average unit ratings and station revenues caused by the inaccurate PPM reports have left minority-targeted stations battered and bruised. Then, rubbing salt in our wounds is the Arbitron station contract. This standard form contract provided to stations by the monopolistic ratings company with little opportunity to negotiate its terms, requires stations to actually pay Arbitron significantly higher fees once the inaccurate system is operating in our markets. More money for less accuracy and lower revenue. The contracts do not require MRC accreditation. The math only benefits Arbitron, which can increase its profits by rushing PPM into markets with faulty methodology. We are dedicated to serving minority audiences in the markets where we have stations, as are other broadcasters who are members of the PPM coalition. It will be a far easier path to jettison this mission and program to the ratings by converting to run-of-the-mill plain vanilla formats. Large group broadcasters with clusters of stations in the market can already do that by shuffling formats among their stations. As minority owners, we have a strong sense of responsibility towards providing broadcast services that otherwise would be unavailable. Our coffers, however, are not bottomless, and our ability to sustain our business in the face of these problems is ultimately limited. Attorneys generals in 4 states have made attempts to ameliorate these problems, but even the simple concept of requiring Arbitron to secure MRC accreditation has thus far not been fruitful. We believe that this committee should send a strong message to the industry that something must be done to preserve diversity of programming and ownership in broadcasting. Requiring accurate and fair ratings data is one step. We believe at least this requires Arbitron to gain MRC accreditation before...
Could you summarize, Mr. Warfield? Could you summarize?
Before any additional markets, I'm about to finish, sir. Before any markets are commercialized. Another is requiring Arbitron to release minority-targeted stations from those burdensome contracts. And with that, I do thank you for the invitation today and welcome any questions as we continue.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Mrs. Pantanini.
Good afternoon, Chairman Towns. Good afternoon, Chairman Towns, Ranking Member Issa, and honorable members of Congress. Thank you for the opportunity to address the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform regarding the serious challenges and repercussions of the rollout and use of Arbitron's personal people meter. I'm Jessica Pantanini, Vice Chair of the Association of Hispanic Advertising Agencies and COO of Bromley Communications, a minority-owned Hispanic advertising agency. AHA represents 98% of Hispanic specialized agencies in the United States and more than 100 related industry suppliers such as research firms, media companies, production companies, all of which the vast majority of are small businesses. I'm here today because the specialized advertising industry is facing severe consequences resulting from the implementation of PPM currency. My testimony here is a culmination of numerous attempts and years of effort and resources to resolve sampling methodology challenges with Arbitron unsuccessfully. Arbitron's continuous improvement plan has yet to alleviate our concerns. What we need is a commitment to when we can expect PPM to be accredited, and I pray that it's before more minority stations are forced out of business. There are 2 points that I'd like to make. One, we support electronic measurement. We believe wholeheartedly that the industry needs to move in that direction and that PPM technology more accurately measures listening versus diary. This is not about PPM versus diary. It's rather about the methodology that fuels the data. In addition, while we may only represent a handful of Arbitron's clients, we are the ones that have a vested interest in the accurate measurement of minority audiences. It is our bread and butter. Our goal is to ensure that radio sampling methodology is reliable and fair so that AHA agencies and members can adequately deliver consumers and ultimately sales for advertisers. We depend on the independent endorsement of accrediting bodies such as the Media Ratings Council to provide us with the confidence we need to make appropriate media buying decisions. Because our membership represents a growing but smaller portion of the market as compared to the general market agencies and radio broadcasting companies, we don't have the resources to verify the data and subsequently rely heavily on the MRC. The bottom line is that Hispanic listeners are being represented inaccurately by Arbitron. And while Arbitron is making great leaps in rolling out PPM, they are only making small improvements in methodology, such as increasing the number of cell phone-only households. Those changes are insignificant compared to the damaging impact that the rollout is having on our industry. We need sustainable change and improvement on the sample now before additional markets are converted to this new currency. Radio is a critical element of our marketing mix and has been the backbone of our advertising outreach efforts for decades. Ethnic stations that were once ranked at the top have dropped significantly in the reported audience levels in PPM markets. We need your help to stop the commercialization of PPM without MRC accreditation or prohibit broadcasters from using PPM data until markets are accredited. Hispanic Americans are fueling the growth as indicated by the census in states such as California, Texas, and Florida, which are becoming majority minority. How is it possible that Arbitron can continue to improperly measure these audiences? In closing, what we ask is that Arbitron is really forced to gain accreditation in these markets. It's key for the success of the industry and has devastating impact to agencies, broadcasters, and advertisers alike.
Thank you very much for your statement. Mr. Flores.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chairman Towns. I am Frank Flores. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Spanish Broadcasting System, SBS, based in New York. SBS is the largest publicly traded Hispanic-controlled media and entertainment company in the United States today. SBS owns and operates 20 radio stations in the Hispanic markets of New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, San Francisco, and Puerto Rico, including 4 of the top-rated Spanish-language radio stations airing the tropical, Mexican regional, Spanish adult contemporary, and urban formats. For the purposes of brevity and not to recount everything that's been said before, let me just summarize a couple of important points. For all intents and purposes, Arbitron is an unregulated monopoly, the only recognized source of radio ratings in the U.S. today, especially in the markets where we operate radio stations. SBS, the company, has had an unblemished history as a client in good standing with Arbitron for over a quarter of a century. SBS was the first group owner to sign up for PPM. SBS was the first minority broadcaster to sign up for PPM. SBS wholeheartedly supports electronic measurement of all radio audiences. However, and this is a big point, significant modifications and alterations need to be undertaken in order for PPM to accurately reflect the listening levels of all minority audiences. The effects of PPM on Spanish radio have been devastating and in direct contradiction to the years of rating results provided by the diary methodology. Worse yet, Arbitron is charging up to 60% more for its PPM ratings than it did for its diary ratings. SBS has offered to assist Arbitron in conjunction and cooperation with other radio colleagues in working on a universally accepted resolution to this PPM issue. Let me further state that the entire industry has been affected by the economy, and some will say that the economy in large part is solely responsible for the downtrend in our business. But there can be no argument that the ratings produced by the PPM methodology has also added greatly to our inability to price our inventory on a competitive basis, lending to these historic declines in revenue. In closing, the minority broadcasting has been unfairly our ability to serve our community. We are hopeful with working with all parties, including Arbitron, to find these solutions. Our goal, minority listeners, the best way, in our opinion, would be MRC accreditation in all markets, and we are resolute to be that our eventual goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Liggins?
Thank you, Chairman Towns, Ranking Member Issa, and other members of the committee for providing me with this opportunity to testify. For those of you I have not met, let me introduce myself. I'm Alfred Liggins, CEO of Radio 1 Incorporated, and as you've heard earlier, we're the largest media company targeting African Americans in the United States. We're a multi-platform company that includes radio, internet, satellite, and our nationally distributed cable network, TV One. As owner of 52 radio stations located in 16 urban markets, I want to express both my support and confidence in the future of urban radio in a PPM world. My understanding is that during this hearing you are asking, does PPM affect the diversity of radio, and is it contributing to minority radio's decline? I categorically say that I believe in both the short and long run. PPM is neither affecting the diversity of our airwaves nor contributing to the decline in minority radio. Rather, what PPM has done is expose some poor choices made during the good times before this recession hit. Some broadcasters became over-leveraged, including ourselves, and perhaps expanded when they should not have, and some broadcasters launched urban formatted stations in markets where there are already established urban radio stations, many that we have owned and many that our colleagues in the minority radio business have owned, and we drew competitors that we should not have. I do not believe that the commercialization of PPM is to blame for the problems currently facing some minority broadcasters. Based on our own PPM experience, PPM does not discriminate against minority-owned broadcasters or urban formatted stations. There are always short-term dislocations and a learning curve when a new technology is adopted. But PPM is the new reality, and I would much rather get reality on the road now and keep it moving forward than to delay it. The heated dispute and controversy result primarily from the fact that the PPM device, as compared to the paper diary, can have a downward impact on the average quarter-hour rating, or AQH, which is a result of dramatically increased CUME audiences combined with lower amounts of time spent listening. The average quarter-hour rating numbers with PPM are generally lower for most stations in all markets, regardless of format. Radio 1 has seen dramatic declines in its AQH ratings after PPM's commercialization in a market. However, by designing our programming for a PPM world, including fine-tuning our music, promotions, and commercial breaks, we have regained most, if not all, of our pre-PPM rank positions without changing formats. Although our audiences are smaller, our rank has returned, and in many cases that ranks us as number 1, 2, or 3 in different markets. The reduction in reported average quarter-hour listing from diary to PPM is not, in my opinion, caused by racial bias, but rather is due to the fact that the diary is a subjective tool that asks participants to recall from memory what stations they listen to on the radio. In my experience, the diary service has a bias in favor of legacy stations or programs with a strong brand name or identity. PPM is a more objective measurement tool that plays no favorites and allows all stations to compete for listeners on a level playing field. The PPM is without question a major improvement over the diary service. It gives broadcasters a type of granular and timely data that the diary system simply cannot provide. For the first time, we can evaluate on a minute-by-minute basis the listening habits of our audience, when they tune in, how long they listen, and when they switch to another radio station. This level of specificity allows us to respond almost in real time to listeners' tastes and show advertisers that we can attract listeners to our programming. That in turn translates into revenue for broadcasters. As a result of the Internet, advertisers expect timely information to respond to ever-changing customer preferences. No matter the media, advertisers expect to see how many eyes and ears are paying attention. PPM is doing that for radio by providing clear, actionable intelligence on radio's audience. If PPM is not universally adopted, the radio industry is in danger of losing advertising dollars to other mass media and information platforms that have passive measurement systems. PPM contributes to advertisers' perception of the strength and value of brand-conscious and brand-loyal African-American consumers who have almost $1 trillion to spend annually. In short, electronic measurement provides compelling evidence about the power of urban radio. Through PPM, Radio 1 has been able to deliver reliable and credible measurement of our audiences to our advertisers. Some have said that PPM should take a breather, especially until it is fully accredited by the Media Ratings Council. My response is an emphatic no, as that would confuse advertisers who now rely on PPM and cause them to question the reliability of radio as an advertising medium. It would hurt the radio industry, not just Arbitron. While we acknowledge that Arbitron has not created a perfect service, in my opinion, we need to move forward with PPM, adapt to it, monitor Arbitron's progress, and offer our suggestions and concerns. Work with Arbitron to make it better and look forward to better times for all in the radio industry. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Let me thank all of you for your testimony. And I also want to thank Arbitron for staying and listening to your testimony. You know, sometimes people come and they testify and they leave, but I want to let them know I respect the fact that they're staying to listen to what you have to say. You know, it was so bad here at one point, you know, when people would testify, you know, and then all the agency heads would leave. I was in the position to have the people talk first and then the agencies come behind them. But I noticed that, you know, we don't have to do that today. They're staying and they're listening to you. To me, I want you to know I'm impressed with that because they appear to be concerned about what you have to say, and that to me means a lot. Let me begin by first, I guess, by asking, have any of your organizations approached Arbitron about problems with its methodology on accounting minorities? And of course, if you did, what happened?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, Inner City Broadcasting, at one point we owned a radio station in Philadelphia when Arbitron had a test market in Philadelphia with PPM, and the issues and concerns that unfortunately we're still facing today with the underrepresentation of minorities existed at that point. We had numerous discussions as an African-American broadcaster with Arbitron, in Arbitron's offices and our corporate offices in New York City, that unfortunately did not bring about the kind of improvements in the methodology that we thought were necessary before it could be commercialized. We specifically asked Arbitron not to commercialize the methodology until those issues had been addressed, and unfortunately we're here today in 2009 still facing those challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms.
Chairman
Pantalani?
Towns. AHA has met with Arbitron several times. one time in person, and then had several communication with them as well. And Arbitron's response has been to provide us with more data to better inform us of why they were taking the positions that they were taking. It is our sense that there was not a willingness to address the issues, but more of a willingness to provide context on their position on the issues.
We've had continual conversations with the good folks at Arbitron, trying to see if we could work out whatever issues there are on the table. I can tell you that we've been in this fight for about 2 years, or a little over 2 years, and at least they're at the point where they're willing to listen to what the issues are. 2 years ago, they believed that they had no problems at all with the PPM. It is a different mindset now.
Okay. Mr. Ligon, are you a member, first of all, let me ask you this, that you feel that the MRC, do you believe that the MRC offers a fair and accurate assessment of audience measurement services? The MRC, you feel they offer?
We are a member of the MRC. Our head of research, Amy Vokes, sits on the MRC, and so she's heavily involved. I am not personally involved, since it's not my particular area of expertise, but in my involvement in this issue, I believe the MRC is a necessary body. I believe there's a lot of smart people there working to make sure that we have accurate measurement and research. But I think one of the problems that you have with the MRC, it's a bit of a black box, in that there aren't any defined benchmarks that a company like Arbitron can meet or hit in order to get accreditation. It makes it very difficult to create a business, roll out a business. I think Mr. Skarzinski mentioned Nielsen and their electronic measurement system, which is still largely unaccredited because of the process and how long it takes, and the fact that there's never a right answer. It's just a notification when we feel that you've met the criteria. So if it was possible to have a goal that was set, where Arbitron, if they hit these metrics, then they could get accredited, I think that this would be a lot more practical and workable. But we're stuck with the system that we have. The MRC is what it is, and as long as it's operated in that manner, which I'm not questioning its validity, it's going to take a long time to get accreditation, if you will.
Right. I guess let me ask the others here. Do you believe that Arbitron should continue trying to achieve accreditation through the MRC? Right down the line.
Go ahead, Frank.
Most definitely. In fact, that we've said from the get-go, and I'm speaking for the PPM Coalition, should Arbitron get MRC accreditation in the markets that we're competing in and operating radio stations, our grievances will go away. So that has been a prime focus of us since the very beginning, and we believe that's an important issue.
As a small business, and AHA representing those small businesses, I will tell you that we don't have the resources available within our organizations to be able to do the kind of due diligence that the MRC provides. And we believe that the MRC, their expertise, the due diligence that they provide, and their focus on auditing is extremely important to ensure the validity of data moving forward.
And at ICBC, we are certainly, as Frank had indicated, as members of the PPM Coalition, we are fully supportive of the MRC process and have made it very clear that our interest is to see the accreditation process completed by Arbitron. And as Frank indicated, the concerns that we have, we believe, would be addressed with the completion of that accreditation, successful completion of that accreditation process by Arbitron with the MRC.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. What do you think accounts for this discrepancy?
I think one of the main concerns that we have is the underrepresentation of segments of our audience in the markets that we operate in, San Francisco and New York. The inconsistent delivery of a representative sample in different age cells, 12 plus, 18 to 34, 25 to 54. In many cases, that it was indicated this morning, it's not just African American. It can be young people that Arbitron consistently has a problem in delivering a representative sample. And we've asked for that from the beginning, but they have not been able to deliver that to give us a product that we believe accurately represents our communities.
All right.
For us, it's also even a question of country of origin, which came up early on when we were looking at some of the findings of the PPM results in the New York area. When we asked the Arbitron representatives, had they taken country of origin into account, they said, why would we? And for people who operate in the Hispanic marketplace and provide radio programs for the Hispanic marketplace, you have to know how diverse it is. And a Hispanic is not a Hispanic. A Mexican Hispanic is different than a Hispanic from the Caribbean. Their music tastes are different. Their language is slightly different. What works on the West Coast will not work on the East Coast, and what works on the Southeast Coast might not necessarily work on the Northeast Coast. It is that diverse and that different. So if country of origin is not taken into account, well then, all you need is one format for the Hispanic, and so be it. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. So even something that we would think would be a give to them was a revelation. They looked at us and they said, why would we care about that? And now they've come around, and now all of a sudden they're examining country of origin, and that's part of what they're looking into. That's quite a different stance than they had in the very beginning. So, and I think that attributed to some of the initial results that we were looking at the PPM.
Thank you very much. I now yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up a little bit on that. Mr. Flores, my understanding is Arbitron now is asking country of origin and never did under the diary system. That's also your understanding?
Yes.
So that could, in fact, be part of why some people are disenchanted with the results is, to a certain extent, the more information you have, it's got to change results. If the results are going down or up, that could be a factor, right?
It definitely could be a factor. And we're talking about results. There's an important factor that no one's talked to about this morning. And someone mentioned the economy, and someone mentioned how that's affected our business. And as I mentioned in my opening testimony, there could be no doubt that the economy has affected our business. But when you have ratings that are 60 or 70% less than they were before, and you have a depressed economy, and you have radio dollars that you're now fighting for that are less, okay? And now you're not number 1 or number 2 or number 3 in a market, you're number 14th or number 15th in a market, well then you're doubly affected. It's not only the economy, it's the economic impact that it has on the radio dollars coming in.
Yeah, good point. Mr. Warfield, if Arbitron's new PPM had led to a 40% increase in your ratings, would you be here today?
I would like to have had that. We would still be wanting to understand why there were such dramatic
No, that
changes.
wasn't the question. Is would you be
Would I be here today?
Yeah.
I probably would not be.
I suspect that the advertising public would be asking why the cost of advertising on your station was going up. Can we all admit that if you get an exact number of minutes that people are listening to a particular station, let me phrase that, have a particular station playing, that will never indicate the value that radio being on will have to a particular advertiser, that numbers alone will never cover it?
That is correct. Numbers alone don't cover that, and we certainly do talk about and do sell the value of our audiences. That's part of the selling process that our stations have always followed. The difficulty you have, though, is when the results, and this is not about diary versus PPM, is when you have such a disproportionate reduction in audience across various formats that are just not explainable, that's an argument that you really don't have a position for.
Joe, and I understand. Mr. Liggins, I'm going to go through a series of questions for you. One, because you're our witness. 8 people, we get 1, you're it. But also because you deal with the same problems Mr. Warfield does. What have you done to show the value of, at a given numeric rating, the value to the advertisers of what you have to offer? In other words, if you're just a commodity rated completely based on Arbitron's numbers and your revenue completely rises or falls with those numbers and nothing else, isn't it true that, in fact, this would be devastating? And I'm not saying it isn't devastating, but it would be devastating and there'd be no recourse. But don't you, in fact, have to deal with what is the value, and how do you demonstrate that to the advertisers on an individual basis after they've looked at your Arbitron number?
Yeah, well, this, as your witness, I'm hoping not to disappoint you.
You're all of our witness, but you're the one we chose.
But I'm going to tell you the truth. If your ratings get cut in half, you can demonstrate value to advertisers, but it will not anywhere near make up for the landslide in falling revenue that you will have. On the margin, you can demonstrate value, but advertising in this country is largely bought on cost per thousand as demonstrated by ratings, and whether that's on the internet or whether that's television or whether that's an outdoor message. So, yes, you can create value. Advertising is priced on supply and demand, so the more people who want your spots, the higher price you can pay. So if you actually perform well for a large number of businesses, then more businesses will want the ads and you can raise the rates. But the fact of the matter is many advertisers don't even really track the response to you individually.
Sure, national advertisers using national agencies.
You're part of a media mix. So at the end of the day, if ratings get cut in half, and look, we have radio stations that have gotten hurt by PPM. In fact, I've got a station here in Washington, D.C. that's ratings weren't cut exactly in half, but it's probably close to 40%, and the revenue's down, 40 to 50%. But I had other radio stations that did better because it showed us having more audience under PPM than the Diary did. So net, I was a fan of more accurate ratings because I felt that we would ultimately be better off. Hurt in some places, but helped in many others. So I think it's a misnomer to think that showing value can actually make up for the dramatic loss of ratings.
Well, let me go through one more round, because if the chairman has indulgence. All 4 of you are basically here to tell us that minorities are being undercounted with PPM, and that this problem is not diaries versus PPM, but it is a problem, and you want to get it right. I'm going to ask each of you what you have done as industry leaders to get the correct count. In other words, and I'll just take you through, politicians do polls or have polls done for them. Pollsters do not take raw numbers and say, here's the results. Pollsters take raw numbers and they take various algorithms, if you will, that have historically shown to be accurate, particularly when they're rating them to what an election day is going to be. Because the people that are actually listening and buying products, that's your election day. And the people that are being polled is Arbitron. That's really what we're dealing with, a poll versus what you say the reality is. Now, I rely on a pollster to tell me the difference between a number he asks and what it really means or will mean predictively on election day. I don't do it very often, but I've done it enough. What have you done as industry leaders to create some sort of a legitimate answer to Arbitron? Here is what you said. Here is what our research, not what your failures are, because we understand they've admitted that they want to make it better. Mr. Liggins, I know they're working with you and others to try to make it better. But what have you done to actually say, here's your number, here's reality? I'm seeing blank faces. Have any of you or collectively done anything so that you can come back and say, here is the proof that our number of listeners is different? I'm not trying to be hard. I think this is a softball.
As I indicated, our company, Intercity Broadcasting, and we have 2 markets that we knew were going to be impacted by Arbitron, because our other 2 markets, Jackson, Mississippi, and Columbia, South Carolina, are in the 83 and 120 are not likely in our lifetimes to probably get PPM measurement. We have worked very closely with Arbitron to understand the underlying methodology here and why the results were where they were. And we have just seen consistently the challenges that are there. Arbitron offered to, for example, to work with our company and work with other minority broadcasters who they also, in looking at the numbers, just looking at the numbers, realized that we were disproportionately impacted by this methodology even before they rolled it out. There were offers that they made, what about if we do some type of an engagement metric or engagement study, which sort of tries to address this issue of loyalty that seems to have been lost in PPM at a cost to the broadcasters, who, quite honestly, we were being asked to pay 65% more with this methodology with less results. That was something that at that point it was premature because we could not get a representative sample. We reached out to other broadcasters to ask them to look at the results of their marketplace and what was going on. Let us try to understand, for example, what is the story of the African American consumer and African American radio stations in this new PPM world? There was no story to tell, unfortunately, without understanding, are we talking about a representative panel, which in 2009 we've still not been able to get through. So as a broadcaster, we have reached out with members of the PPM Coalition who, as they started to roll this out in pre-currency in New York City, suddenly got to understand what we have been seeing in some markets.
And I apologize, Mr. Warfield, but my question is more narrow than that. We can't deal with the difference between loyalty, et cetera, in some way from here, and neither can Arbitron. What they can do, and what I hope that we're helpful here today on the dais, because we are on a bipartisan basis very concerned, is if in fact your real effective numbers should be weighted in some way to where an advertiser, and I used to be an advertiser, can look and say, wait a second here, a comparative value of being on one of your stations or one of any of your stations is an 8, not a 6, and I'm looking at a rate and I'm assuming I'm going to pay so much per million. You can probably make a lot of arguments about your listeners being better than that guy's listeners. That's what I was leading to with Mr. Liggins. But from our standpoint, if the effective number, because of undercount, who's willing to carry PPM, any of that, if it's off, what were you asking yourselves to do, or Arbitron, who has stayed here and really, I believe, wants to get the right number, regardless of everything that's being said at times, what have you done to say, okay, here's how we could analytically come up with a rate, and we would accept that adjusted rate? In other words, the scored rate is here, the skew is this. It doesn't seem like it'd be that hard. I did direct marketing at one time. We tagged 800 numbers so that every single ad, if it went out on a different station, had a different 800 number. People used the 800 line. We verified what our return on investment was. That allowed us to take and know, as I said in my opening remarks, that BET, and I didn't say in my opening remarks, the Toon Network outperformed on a per dollar of advertising dollar many of the other competitors in our buy. We did that because we wanted to know. Now, that's an advertiser. You're the people who want to sell me, in my old profession. What are you doing to work with our Arbitron, or asking us to ask them to do to get that number right, so the number doesn't have to be direct market checked by somebody like me, but in fact you and the rating agency, if you will, can come out with an accurate rating agency. This is no different than we asked Standard & Poor's, by the way, when they had them in here and we wanted to know why junk was being rated AAA. We are just as concerned here. Please.
Let me see if I could answer that in a very analytical way. It would be nice if we could afford to find another service to come in and give us what we would consider more accurate ratings. But at this point in time, with the exorbitant amount of money that we have to pay on our current contracts to Arbitron and the current economic conditions of our radio stations, we cannot afford to do so. So we rely on pushing as much as we can, as many buttons as we can in front of us, including the MRC, including meetings with Arbitron, to get that, because we can't afford an alternate service to come in and give us that. We can't. It's as simple as that. If we get some leverage on our contract, had we not signed such onerous contracts that don't allow us to do that, we might be able to do so. We might be able to get someone that can step up to a monopoly and say, here's a different form of reading this marketplace, and here you have an ability and an opportunity to go and seek where your ratings really are.
Mr. Liggins?
Yeah, I think, Arbitron's put together a committee to work on this, but some metric that isolated sort of passive exposure to what was really active listening would actually help minority-targeted formats. One of the things that's driven, the reason these minority radio stations, including our targeted radio stations, had such high ratings in the diary is because the diary keeper would say, I listened to WKYS and just draw a line, said I listened all day. Well, actually, minorities do listen to radio longer. They're more engaged. They take it more seriously. If you were able to isolate that electronically somehow, then you could show a different value. Actually, what you would do is you would discredit the audience of the easy listening station that, and this happens in PPM, the easy listening station could be number 2 with teens, 12 to 17. Playing beautiful music, and we know that's not the case, but if meters just happen to be in an environment carried by a teenager where they're exposed, then that's what you get. I think that they're working on that. I know we're pushing for that. That would be extraordinarily helpful in leading back to your other question and presenting value.
Can I also say one more thing? Because I think there's something that hasn't been said here that I think needs to be said. Even if the playing field were right, even if it's PPM or diaries, okay? Because I can speak about diaries, and I can tell you when the playing field was right in the New York area. I worked for Infinity Broadcasting that had Howard Stern in the morning. I was a director of sales before I came to SBS. Howard left that radio station at the tail end of 2005. All of 2006 in the New York area, the #1 morning show was a Spanish language radio station that was owned and operated by us. Now ask me, did we get the same rates? And I can tell you emphatically, not even a quarter of the same rates that radio station, my ex-radio station, had. So our audiences are already discounted. Our audiences are already not seen with the same quality of the same rating of the same audiences in other radio stations, general market radio stations. Add insult to injury and put us at 50 or 60 or 75% less in rating, and what do you get?
Well, Mr. Chairman, as we close, I found both panels very informative. I intend on writing a letter to Mr. Skarzinski and to Arbitron asking them to come back to us and tell us what they could do to do some of this analytical analysis without additional burden on our broadcasters, particularly minority broadcasters. I also, for one, would like to see those innovations, and I would like to see as much information as the committee can request and Arbitron can give us of side-by-side comparisons when a diary was being filled out and someone was carrying the PPM device, so that we could have a closure to all of the questions that I think were developed here today on electronic versus diary, and hopefully we can be constructive for the minority-owned stations and to be honest, for all of the rating stations, because if you get it right, we get it right for everyone. And, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for holding an important, a long overdue hearing, and for putting the time and effort into this, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. And let me just, before we close out my closing statement, Mr. Liggins, you said that Radio 1 was able to regain its market share by changing programming to fit the PPM world. What do you mean by that? I tried not to ask that. I was trying to see if I could figure it out on my own.
That's fair. One example is that during the diary method, because the diary is done in quarter hours, programmers thought that the best way to get the highest ratings would be to stack all of your commercials all at once and run 10 of them at the same time with very long, what you call stop sets, so you could sweep music for 40 minutes. So you're kind of running, one 20-minute block that's 80% commercials, and then you got a 40-minute block that's commercial-free. Well, the fact of the matter is we found that it does the exact opposite in PPM. You're better off having more stop sets with actually fewer commercials in them. One of the things that you're also seeing in PPM is that the talk show hosts, the Hannitys, the Rush Limbaughs, I'm sure the Democrats would be happy to hear this, actually have less audience than, they're still loud and noisy, and they make a big impact, but the fact of the matter is their audiences in PPM have dropped dramatically, and I'm sure that their ad revenues are following as well. So what does that say? It says that talk, no matter how big a personality you are, if it's not absolutely entertaining, is a death nail, and so you have to be very careful about what your personalities are saying. Some personalities are better than others. It'll also, PPM will show you that people actually do listen to football games on the radio, and audiences spike. You can tell which bits work. I don't know how many of you listen to the Tom Joyner Morning Show, but you can actually go through Tom Joyner's hour and figure out whether Huggy Lowdown or the Little Known Black History Fact or the Black America Web News, which one of those are draws and which one of them which one of those are turnoffs, and then you adjust your programming dramatically. In fact, Tom has actually reformatted almost his entire show over the last 2 years because of information we found out from PPM.
All right, thank you. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, one thing I'd like to say about that is, as Alfred said, I mean, many of us use the data. I mean, on the one hand, the Arbitron data is the only data that we have available to use, so we do have to use that data, and we do pay for that service. On the other hand, as Mr. Liggins just indicated, we are making those types of changes on air, whether we like that or not. Unfortunately, as he indicated, you're taking resources away from the community. In many cases, you're taking programs that were previously very successful, and you're taking them off the air. But it still does not cover the reality here that in this PPM world, that the formats that have taken the greatest hit, the greatest decline in ratings consistently, market after market, has been Spanish and urban radio station formats. It was stated this morning that these formats still perform well. They do, at a much larger decline in their currency, average quarter hour, than any other formats that have been affected by this methodology.
Can I say just one last thing? I find it really interesting that in this day and age, when you pick up a newspaper and you find out that the exploding segments of our society happen to be Hispanic and new arrival Hispanic, that Hispanic listening across the board is down dramatically. These people are not coming in from Dubuque or Montana. These people are coming in from countries that only speak Spanish, and they're arriving here with no English skills whatsoever. So I know that our audience should be increasing in numbers that are great, and PPM shows it to be just the opposite. That can't be. Logic tells me that that's not right. So I can't accept that. There has to be a disconnect someplace.
With the new census, there should be a rebalancing of the populations, which will flow through to Arbitron's database, and hopefully that'll help Black and Hispanic formatted stations. In Houston, Texas, because of Katrina, we think the Black population's probably gone from 16.5% to 20%, and we're hopeful that that's what the census will show, and that we'll benefit from that, and hopefully you guys will too.
I agree. However, the issue at hand is the audience is currently not represented for the size that those segments represent today, and the census isn't going to come out for another 2 years before we actually get the data. So we are way behind the 8 ball, and from an advertiser point of view, if it's not working, it's very difficult to get an advertiser to come back into the marketplace. If you can't prove success today to an advertiser and a return on investment today, they're not going to be back tomorrow. And that's the problem that we face. We've got radio stations that we know have historically performed very well in the marketplace. They don't have the numbers. Without the numbers, we can't justify being them on a buy. Without them being on a buy, we have ineffective plans in market. And it's very difficult to convince advertisers today to spend money in minority audiences. And when you finally make that effort and get them to spend the money and they don't see the results, they're not coming back.
And as far as the new arrivals, how successful could you possibly be trying to convince them to wear some sort of LoJack device on them, okay, when they come from countries that they don't trust their own government. And you think how successful you're going to be to get people to do that. So maybe your panels or your samples are going to represent more English-dominant Hispanics than Spanish-dominant Hispanics, and that might be a problem for all Hispanic radio stations, because that's who we serve.
Thank you very much. Let me thank both panel witnesses, and of course I want to thank the ranking member and all the members who attended this hearing today. And before we adjourn, I must say that today's hearing has demonstrated the ineffective process currently in place to ensure the accuracy in media rating services. I remain gravely concerned about the future of minority-owned and targeted radio stations if Arbitron does not act quickly to correct these problems. Minorities have battled over the past 30 years to obtain just 2% of the radio stations they now have. 2%. And we are on the brink of losing much of that progress. The Congress should not allow this to happen. The MRC was created to ensure media ratings are fair and accurate. However, Arbitron seems to take the MRC's code of conduct as a mere suggestion. They feel free to ignore MRC's recommendations and just move on. This approach must change. I'm prepared to introduce legislation which protects both the consumer and all radio and television competitors if necessary. I hope I don't have to do that. I hope that we can work things out. The ranking member suggested that we have some further discussions and dialogue and to see in terms of how we might be able to work together to resolve some of these issues, and I hope we can do that. However, I urge all the participants involved in this issue, including the MRC and the FCC, to work during the next month to reach a solution to this problem. The very survival of small and minority radio is at stake. I want to see a plan of action and a realistic timetable, as the ranking member also suggested, develop over the next 30 days to correct this unsustainable situation. After that point, I will look to see if sufficient progress has been made or whether the Congress will need to step in. We don't want to step in, and I hope we don't have to step in, but I want you to know I am prepared to do whatever it takes to get an acceptable resolution to this problem. Again, let me thank all of the witnesses. I look forward to working with you because I really feel that we can do better, and I'm always for fairness, and I think that what we see and hear here is not fairness. Thank you so much for coming, and the committee is now adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.